Everybody, I'm Heidi from Hands Occupied here with another knitting video tutorial for you today. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to correct some of the most common mistakes you're going to run into as a knitter. Drop stitches, working a knit instead of a purl, laddering stitches, that kind of stuff. I'm especially going to focus on stockinette stitch and garter stitch because this is a very beginner-oriented video, but it's also one that I hope you guys can refer to again and again. So let's dive in. In the knitting world, there's a decent amount of slang, and one such slang word is the word tink. T-I-N-K is literally the word knit, K-N-I-T, backwards. So tinking is the nickname the knitting community has given for unknitting or knitting backwards. I'm right-handed and knit in the continental style. You can see in this close-up that stitch by stitch, I'm simply putting the loop back on the needle from the row below, while I pull out the stitch that I had knit in the following row. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. If you've noticed just a couple stitches after you've made a mistake that you made a mistake, tinking is a fantastic way to fix the problem. Since I also knit throwing style, and I know many of you are throwers, here's some footage of what it looks like to tink if you are a throwing style knitter. Again, we're picking out each stitch and with our tensioning hand, pulling out the loop from the subsequent row. The first mistake we're going to tackle is what to do when you have simply knit the wrong stitch, whether that's knitting instead of a purl or purling instead of a knit. I'm about to show you what to do when you have worked the wrong stitch and you need to change it. Looking at our knitting here, you can see that to access this mistake stitch, we're going to need to rearrange some stitches on our needles. To do this, we need to go over a few stitches and down a few rows using our knitting needles. Allow me a moment of sped up footage to get to the problem stitch. We're almost to that stitch that we need, so I'm going to turn my work over so you can see from the right side that we have picked out stitches until we reached the column where the problem stitch is located. Next, we need to do something called laddering down to get to that bump. This is where it gets a little scary if you've never intentionally laddered down in your knitting before. You're going to take the next stitch, which should be a stitch directly above the problem stitch in your column of stitches here. Then you're going to pop it off your needle and pull horizontally on your knitting and kind of downward. And as you do, your stitches will pop out one by one, leaving these horizontal bars of yarn. Each bar used to be a knit stitch, and they also happen to look like the rungs on a ladder. So when you start having several of them in a row, that's why we call it laddering down. This might look familiar if you've ever gotten a run in your stockings or a commercially bought sweater. A run is essentially laddering down or up, depending on the garment. Now we have gotten to the incorrect stitch. I'm going to use the tip of my needle to pull this out. If your yarn is toothy or it really likes to stick to itself like Velcro, you will need to be careful as you ladder down to avoid pulling too hard on your knitting. And there we have it. We've identified and laddered down to the problem stitch and can now fix it. At this point, a crochet hook of about the same size as your knitting needles is going to come in handy, although you can do this without a crochet hook if you prefer. If you use a crochet hook, you're going to insert it from the bottom edge of your knitting toward the top, like I'm doing here, through the stitch we laddered down to. Next, reaching through that stitch and behind the bar of yarn above it, you're going to draw up a loop through the once problem stitch, and now you've made it a regular knit stitch like the rest of this piece of knitting that we're looking at. Let's zoom in a little and take another look. See how I've pulled up the next bar of yarn through the stitch and we're ready to do it again? Grabbing the next rung on our ladder, we're going to draw it through the loop, being careful to grab the correct horizontal bar of yarn. Once we have run out of stitches to pick up, we are going to plop that fixed stitch back on our needle and we are ready to finish knitting the row with our completely corrected swatch. As you can see, no more unwanted bumps are in our knitting. Another funny term that you encounter in the knitting world is frogging. Frogging is when you pull your knitting needles out of your work and start tearing back out rows of work, sometimes a lot of rows, before picking your stitches back up and continuing on. When you're frogging, you're ripping out your knitting, and when frogs make a noise, they ribbit. So legend has it, frogging gets its name because you are ripping out your knitting like a frog says ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. When I learned this name derivation, my jaw hit the floor. It is admittedly a weird one. So in frogging, after you've pulled out a bunch of rows of your knitting, you're left with all of these live stitches, these loops that need to be put back on the needles. The thing is, a lot of people don't realize there's a right way and a wrong way to pick up these loops. In knitting, the stitches do not rest on our knitting needle parallel to each other like the loops on a shower curtain rod. They actually angle to one side, and there's a right way and a wrong way for your stitches to lean. It's really easy to mix it up when you're picking up frog stitches. Picking up my stitches here, you can take a look at how they lay on the needle. My stitches all pretty much have the same even tension except for this one stitch that's a little bit tighter. And if you look close, you'll see that it's angling the wrong way, left to right instead of right to left on the needle. After picking up the rest of my row here, I'm going to start purling until I reach the stitch that's angling the wrong way on my needle. And as I worked, I realized I was going to miss the stitch, so I decided to add a stitch marker just to save myself some time. And now we keep on purling until we reach our stitch. All right, here we are, and we have a couple of things to look at. In addition to the loop laying the wrong way on the needle, I've also managed to split my yarn. This is another common thing that really can trip up newer knitters. What happened here is I only picked up part of the strand of yarn. Many yarns are made up of multiple strands of yarn called plies, like 2-ply toilet paper. And when it splits like this, it can mess up our tension and generally be confusing for new knitters. To fix it, you'll grab that extra ply of yarn and pop it back to rejoin its friends in the stitch. The stitch is still laying the wrong way on the needle, so a simple fix is grabbing it with the other needle and turning it so it is parallel with all of its little friends, making our finished knitting ever so beautiful and correct looking. Now you can see all those loops laying nice and parallel on our needle, and now you can finish out the purl side row. In knitting, it's really easy to accidentally drop a stitch or just not work it when you're knitting. It's also easy to not realize your mistake until rows later. Much like when we worked that wrong stitch and needed to fix it at the beginning of this video, the first thing we need to do is identify our dropped stitch. And in my case here, I'm laddering down a little bit just so I can demonstrate fixing this better. Now we are going to work our row until we reach the column of stitches where the dropped stitch is. Now looking at our work, we need to grab a crochet hook. Once again, one that's about the same size as our needles. And much like before, we're going to use the hook to fix our dropped stitch. But before we do, I want to quickly take a look at the ladders between stitches and highlight some differences from what we saw before. You might notice that the top two rungs on our ladder are a little tighter than the ones near our dropped stitch. That's because when we stopped working our stitch a couple rows ago, less yarn was used per row, resulting in less yarn available to be picked up to fix our mistake. Luckily, in most cases, this isn't that big of a deal, and resulting tension issues can be fixed or at least well hidden through blocking. So to actually fix this dropped stitch, we're going to set aside the stitch marker and insert our hook from the bottom to the top through the available loop. Just like before, you'll find the next available rung from your ladder and draw up a loop. And since this is stockinette stitch, it's a really simple action in the same direction all the way up, like this. And just like before, you'll return your last loop to your needle in the correct direction, and then you'll be ready to continue knitting. Before I let you go, I want to show you how to fix mistakes in garter stitch. In knitting, stockinette stitch is the name for when you knit one row on the right side and purl one row on the wrong side. Garter stitch, on the other hand, is knit on both sides, and this is what they look like next to each other. Garter stitch fabric is a little bit puffier and slightly more three-dimensional. Stockinette fabric is a little flatter and it curls up at the edges. For demonstration's sake, I've randomly selected a stitch in the middle of my row, and I'm just going to ladder down to it so I can show you how to fix it. I'm going to pull my stitches a little bit down my knitting needle so that they don't fall off to start. Then I'm going to grab my handy dandy crochet hook that's about the same size as my knitting needles. Now for stockinette stitch, we always used our crochet hook in the same direction to pick up stitches row after row, but with garter stitch, that's not the case. We're going to insert our hooks through the available loop and then draw up a stitch, but we have to pay attention to which way we weave our loops. Right here, you can see that I did this stitch backwards. You know it's incorrect because the stitch looks like a little V rather than matching the squiggly shape of the surrounding stitches. That means we fixed our stitch the wrong way. Again, just showing this incorrect way for an example. Now I will show you what the right way looks like. I undid the incorrectly fixed stitch, and now I'm going to insert my hook from the top to the bottom of the available loop, but also behind the next rung on our ladder, the next horizontal bar of yarn. We're going to catch that bar with our hook and draw up a loop, like this. And now you can see that by inserting a hook from top to bottom and drawing up a loop in this way, our stitches now look the same as the surrounding knitting. Continuing on, we need to find the next horizontal bar of yarn, and this time insert our hook from bottom to top like we did for the stockinette stitch fix. We're going to be alternating directions on every row for garter stitch. So next we're inserting our hook behind the next rung of yarn and through the available loop. Grabbing the rung of yarn with our hook, we draw up a loop to complete the stitch. And then you'll continue in that manner, inserting the hook from bottom to top and drawing up a loop, followed by top to bottom and pulling up a loop until you have fixed your column of stitches all the way up the swatch. Now to finish, we're going to plop that last loop back on our needle. And there, you can see my knitting is now fixed, and I can continue on knitting with my row. And that's what to do if you run into a mistake in your knitting. If you've got any questions, go ahead and reach out in the comments. Give us a like if you like what you saw, and subscribe for even more video tutorials. Thanks for watching.